While we do get to explore some of the most disturbing vaults in all of Fallout in the games, some have so far only been left to players' imaginations. And two of the most unbelievable of these are Vault 68 and Vault 69. Each of the vaults was performing the same experiment but reversed. In Vault 68, they were staffed with 999 men and 1 woman. In Vault 69, they were staffed with 999 women and 1 man. Each of these experiments was to see what would happen when only one of each sex was left with hundreds of the opposing. While little is known about what actually happened in these vaults, we can pick up on small tidbits we see in comments or canceled projects, or just our own imagination to paint a brutal scene. In Vault 68, the one full of men and 1 woman, it is theorized that the men started to fight amongst one another, resulting in a bloody mess, where only the most dominant of each tribe were able to have their way with the one unlucky female. Population growth would have been exceptionally slow, and any baby that the female had that was male was instantly killed off, slowly leading to the death of the entire vault as the female withered away. In Vault 69, however, where only 1 man was tasked with repopulating with 999 females, not much is known either. But it can be assumed that early on, the man would have been living out what many males would consider a fantasy, only to realize he had no male friends to confide in, slowly going insane after impregnating and repopulating much of the vault. The females, on the other hand, would have lived a mostly amazing life, free from our bullshit. Perhaps the most recognizable creature from the entire series, the Peepers are those cute little fishes we see in the starting zones of the Subnautica games, near coral reefs. They're a welcome addition to a world that is filled to the brim with creepy and disturbing monsters, and serve as a playful escape from the horrors we find in deeper waters. But these happy-go-lucky fish may actually be hiding a secret. You see, as any Subnautica veterans know, as you start to venture into deeper and less explored zones, you begin to encounter leviathans, or massive underwater monsters that will attack and slaughter you at a moment's notice. Shortly after the initial release of Subnautica, however, rumors started to swirl that some players were encountering a different kind of leviathan deep in the lava zone, none other than a massive and aggressive Peeper? Many in the community have since tried to hunt down this ancient beast, but to no avail, and even after searching the game files, there's no such reference to the monster. So it looks like the Peeper Leviathan is nothing more than a myth and April Fool's joke, but there are some signs pointing to the idea that it may actually not be so far-fetched, like some very old and early Subnautica concept art that seems to depict Peeper-like creatures with a much more massive scope. Could it be one of our greatest sources of food in the games is actually hiding a massive secret, one that would see us becoming the food instead? Potentially there was an idea to put it into the game at some point, but it was cut out. After all, the Peepers in the series do play a huge role. Either way though, to this day, many are still out in the deepest waters of Subnautica searching for the great Peeper Leviathans. And in fact, there's even a host of mods available online today to the community that can make this dream come true. Atom Smasher turned out to be a pretty weak villain in the game, but there is one really interesting interaction early on in the story that a lot of players may have missed on their first playthrough. When you're at Konpeki Plaza with Jackie stealing the data shard, at one point you're almost caught red-handed and have to hide inside Yorinobu's room while Saburo Arasaka and Atom Smasher themselves enter the room as well. On first glance, it seems like you narrowly avoided being detected, but upon further inspection, that may not be the case. You see, there's an iCyberware mod called a Threat Detector that, when equipped, shows any enemies in the area that are aware of your presence and outlines them in red. And lo and behold, if you have this equipped during the cutscene, you can see Atom Smasher clearly outlined in red, staring right at you and Jackie. Could this mean Atom Smasher knew the whole time? Were you set up from the beginning? Did Atom know Saburo was about to be killed? This would have major ramifications on the story of the game. Or it could just be that all the bosses in the game have a script that allows them to see you at all times for gameplay purposes. But let's ignore that, because that's not fun. Everyone's favorite canine companion from Fallout 4, Dogmeat, is a super lovable character. He helps you find loot, he bites every enemy in your path, and most importantly, he's a good boy. But some Fallout fans have started to wonder if Dogmeat is even a real dog. You see, originally we find him outside the Red Rocket gas station at the very start of the game. And the fact that he is so well trained and immediately obedient and takes a liking to you is very weird. And as you play through more of the game, you start to notice more interesting oddities, like the fact that he takes no radiation damage. Almost every other animal in the game has become mutated from radiation poisoning, and other dogs that we meet in the game, like Rex, are, well, different. But Dogmeat seems to be an excellent fighter, perfectly trained, immune to radiation and plasma gunfire, and also one of the only dogs in the whole game that looks this pristine. Could it be that Dogmeat was actually sent from the Institute to guide you on your path to a secret hidden location? Maybe Dogmeat is actually a synth robot posing as man's best friend, all in a ploy to bring you to Sean at the Institute. But even if he is a conniving robot, he's still the cutest companion in all of Fallout. In Fallout 3, at one point on your quest to get a Gek, a terraforming device created by FutureTech, a division of Vault-Tec, you might stumble upon the infamous Vault 87. When first trying to enter the vault, you will notice just outside the location there are many radiation warning signs, suggesting that this vault was outputting a lot of radiation even before the bombs dropped. And if you actually try to go towards the two entrances of the vault, you will be killed immediately by the immense amount of radiation you immediately are pummeled with. Luckily though, if you make your way back to Lamplight City, a giant underground town full of children who lost their parents after they all tried to go to the surface to get help, you are told about a supposed murder pass that you can cross to get to Vault 87 from the underground. The children of Lamplight had previously explored deeper into the underground cave systems and found the vault, but the inhabitants on the other side said to turn back because they were already doomed. So if you find one of the two ways into the vault, either through a computer terminal or by fighting your way through an army of super mutants guarding the door, you eventually get to the entrance. When you first enter the vault, you are met with a buffet of mutilated bodies and corpses. And if you find one of the terminals at the entrance, you read the story of a man who slowly descends into insanity, watching his children and those around him die. As you make your way further into the vault, you find a host of gore bags, used by the super mutants to serve other humans as food. And you find more terminals that express that many people in the vault had no idea what was actually going on at the time, and were confused. Journal entries note that there were many power surges, weird experiments, and strange sounds many of the early residents complained about. And you eventually even find a terminal entry that notes 93 people have died in the vault, with 83 being listed under a strange and mysterious, unidentifiable death condition. If you manage to make your way even deeper into this twisted vault, you are met with multiple bloody handprints, scenes of horror, and finally, a room where you can find multiple testing chambers full of dead, early-generation super mutants. The scientists in the vault were experimenting on the human inhabitants by dousing them with high amounts of FEV radiation, also known as the Force Evolutionary Virus, which was the virus spawned out of developing a cure for the new plague. These deadly doses had transformed many of the inhabitants into absolute monstrosities known as super mutants, the first generation of their kind, with many having busted limbs, small lower bodies and massive upper bodies, and other weird disfigurements. You discover that there was something known as EEP testing going on here, otherwise known as the Evolutionary Experimentation Program, and that the male and female test subjects were being exposed to insanely high amounts of FEV radiation in order to study the effects, which turned most of the vault dwellers into asexual and imperfect super mutants. Eventually, these super mutants became enraged at the horrible testing they had undergone and led an assault against the vault, killing the remaining members. And it can even be discovered at the end of the vault that the FEV radiation we discovered outside was actually done on purpose by Vault-Tec to test the effects of FEV on nearby surrounding towns as well. A truly unbelievable experiment that truly went too far. Subnautica's Lost River is host to some of the most ancient and interesting finds in the entire game series, and our long-lost forgotten Leviathan-class organism is no different. because right outside the laboratory cache lies a massive and million-year-old fossil belonging to a species we have never seen in-game before. The monstrosity sits at just over the length of a sea truck and is sporting a massive set of teeth and spikes on its head, along with 3 similarly shaped eye sockets on each side of its skull. It almost is reminiscent of research specimen Theta in a lot of ways, and actually might even be an organism of the same species, but much older. While at first glance the fossil seems to be just the head of the beast, upon further inspection it becomes clear that the fossil is in fact the entire body, with just a little bit hidden under the sand. The most interesting part about this creature though is the implications of its body on its movement. The body is sporting no fins or ways of movement we often see in other aquatic animals, and this is usually an indication that the animal actually moves on the ocean floors. So is it possible that we are looking at a giant carnivorous sea slug that combs the depths of the sea on this planet? An even bigger question arises when we realize that this is the only instance of this type of skull we see in the entire series, where most others we find have multiple renditions. Could this mean that this apex predator actually lives beneath the sand and inside rocks, and burrows around the environment stalking its prey? We know there were similar sorts of animals that were cut from the game originally, but at one point were planned to pop out of different rocks and surfaces to scare the player. It certainly would make sense based on the shape of this creature, and if it were true, it would prove that we have only scratched the surface of what we can find in Subnautica on our adventures so far. The first thing that most players do when they wake up as Morgan in his room in the beginning of Prey is run over to their computer and log in to check their emails to see what's going on. But for players paying especially close attention, you may have noticed that Morgan's password is actually FP-Aradox ? For those that don't know, this is an obvious reference to the Fermi paradox, which is a popular question in science that asks why we have not found any intelligent life yet, even with the high likelihood that it should be occurring more often. We can even search Morgan's room more and find documents and books that directly talk about this weird conundrum, and the connections only get deeper too when we look at the posters in the room as well, which show diagrams of the Fermi paradox, as well as references to the Drake equation, which was a mathematical model meant to calculate the probabilities of aliens actually existing in the universe. It's a cool Easter egg for those of you who missed it, and was our first in-game hint that something strange was about to happen. But for me, it's the poster near the front door that has me really intrigued, as it almost looks like an indication of how the Typhon may have arrived into our realm of existence. And if that is what this painting is of, could it be that the Typhon stem from some sort of alternate dimension of pure darkness from which they traverse to find us? Considering we have almost no idea where these aliens actually stem from, this poster may be our best indication.